spent the past couple of years in a crazy hot market. Louisville home sales decline as demand outpaces supply. Effective communication is at the core of any situation. If you master these two ideas, you'll have a chance of being successful at residential real estate marketing. I think you need to be looking for investment opportunities that move the needle. The market will never crash if demand exceeds supply. This is what I've been telling you all along.
This is the Jay Pitts Show.
And we're back, folks. Welcome back to the Jay Pitts Show, Talk Radio 1080. I am your host, Jay Pitts, here with Ryan Harris, my co-host. Ryan, what's up, sir?
I like that in the beginning. The market will never crash if demand exceeds supply.
Oh, dude. Like, am I a broken record? Or am I a broken record?
Oh, like we're going to talk about it here.
At least it seems the national media has caught on that this is the case. I've only been saying it for the last 6 months.
It's funny you said that. I've started noticing that more this week, that it really in the media, you're starting to see headlines that home prices aren't falling. Sorry.
They've never been falling. Like in most markets. I mean, it's a few isolated, siloed kind of, market-specific kind of dynamics exist. Like San Francisco, right? Like, luxury apartments in Austin, like things like that. Rent prices have fallen a little bit. I think I actually read something where nationally rent prices have reduced by 6%.
I read that too. So, well, it actually went on to say, I went through one of the articles and it was like, but it's decreased so little you wouldn't even notice if you are renting an apartment right
basically
now.
Insignificant.
Exactly.
Basically. So now I know we're going to talk about the market, man. That's usually what we open with, but what else you got on your mind, man? What's the plan for today?
Yeah, we'll do story from the field like we usually do. An agent has a question. This helps agents that listen and consumers. So this has been a really strong segment for us, story from the field. We're going to talk about how as sellers and buyers are feeling the lock-in effect in today's market, which we have been preaching about the last month or so. Pets over partners. Gen Z wants fence yards over double sinks. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then there's going to be a new home value reassessment for West and Southwest Louisville. We'll go over that. Might get into some real estate scams, and then I got a few random questions for you at the end.
Okay.
So before that, you just got back from a trip, didn't you?
Well, yes and no. It was spring break with the kids. We did a little short trip, long weekend, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Good times.
I always get, everybody's spring breaks are so different now.
Yeah.
Even E-Town to Louisville and high school, middle school, then you got colleges, everybody. It's so different.
College is always earlier, but the one thing that I like is the last few years, JCPS and the private schools, the Catholic schools at least, have lined them up. But you get outside of Jefferson County, so like you said, Hardin, Shelby, Oldham, it may be slightly different.
I know
Indiana.
Two of our 4 spring breaks while I was at Bellarmine, it snowed. And one of those, it snowed about a foot. So
brutal.
It's early.
I played baseball, right? Were you guys out playing golf that early?
We went to Florida and played.
So you went to Florida and played. Well, yeah, I mean, we got to take a trip south too, but I mean, we were playing here in the snow before we left. Like literally played a doubleheader at Pikeville College, and it's like 29 and flurries. Like try to hit a baseball, right, with snow flurries the size of quarters falling from the sky. I mean, it's like it's a depth perception nightmare.
Sure, it stings your hands just like golf if you hit a thin shot. Yeah.
Being a catcher, it was the worst. I was a catcher. So, you got these guys throwing 90 miles an hour and you're sticking it on the outside corner and it just eating your palm alive.
That sounds rough. But all right, let's get into story from the field.
Sure.
So this agent wrote in and said, I'm a listing agent on a property that came in $10,000 light on the appraisal. My seller is willing to drop the price to match the appraisal value, and we sent over a price adjustment, but the buyer agent sent over a cancellation stating the FHA mandatory clause gives her the right to back out. My seller is considering suing for performance. Do you have any insight?
Well, I do have insight. I do. First thing I'll say, was this a local agent? You'll have to help me here. Was it a local?
No, it wasn't.
Okay, so it wasn't a local agent, so I will say this could have been a local scenario. It could have been happening in almost any market. I will say the prevailing kind of concern is your contract, how your contract is written. It makes me think their contract does not provide the buyer an out since they're citing the amendatory clause for FHA financing. I think that's valid, the way the amendatory clause is written. I think that's valid. However, most contracts, our contract here locally, would provide the buyer an out in the event of an underappraisal. Now, it doesn't seem to make sense, and I would understand you making that argument that it doesn't make sense. If the buyer gets the reduced price, they thought they were paying market value before, they are in fact paying market value after the reduction, if the seller's willing to take all of the risk, or all of the hit. But there are a few options in the event that a property underappraises. If you're using the local Board of Realtors contract, there are a few provisions allowed. Number one, buyer can get out. Okay. Number two, buyer and seller can renegotiate, which could be what the seller was offering here, which is a full reduction of price. It doesn't seem like a negotiation when one side takes all the hit, but it is in fact a negotiation. It's just the buyer wins that negotiation. It could easily be a 50-50 split with the buyer bringing more money. It could be basically either of those things can occur, right? The cancellation, the buyer comes up with a portion or all of the difference in cash, or the seller takes a portion of a hit or the entire hit. So I guess that's three things if you look at it. Buyer pays, seller pays, or the deal's dead.
My guess is this buyer might have got cold feet, or
Agreed.
Another option if you really want to look into it, because from what I remember from this question, it was in a market where there actually is inventory and homes aren't selling just in the click of a finger. So this buyer could have been hoping the appraisal was going to come in lower. They offered and were hoping for a lower appraisal, didn't get it, and that was their decision to walk.
It's quite possible. I mean, buyers have been doing all sorts of unorthodox things the last few years. You really have a hard time knowing entirely what anyone's motives are anymore. There's lots of pressure. There could be a freak out moment happened. You just never really know. But the truth is, in all scenarios, not just this one, it is incredibly difficult for a seller to force performance upon a buyer. Almost any market, almost any court, almost any, oversight, whether it be mediation, arbitration, or a court of law, you're going to have a hard time finding a judge or mediator or arbitrator that will side with the seller and force performance, right? Force performance. Think about that. No transaction is typically better than a bad transaction. Damages are created in bad transactions. So nobody wants that blood on their hands, so to speak. Figuratively, of course, but like that judge doesn't, if they force the performance and the buyer defaults on their mortgage, it ruins them financially and their credit and, God forbid, worse, because people do crazy things when they're under financial distress. The judge doesn't want that.
I mean, the way I'm looking at this, the listing agent's probably the one who made the biggest mistake here. Because if they're writing this in and what they're saying here, it seems like they did not explain the amendatory clause to their seller.
No, I would agree. And you don't know where the seller comes out on this. The seller could be calm. They could be up in arms. You have no idea. It sounds to me like an agent who is ill-prepared, who's grasping at straws, trying to make an untenable argument in a situation where you should just be putting the property back on the market and moving forward. The truth is, you may sell the property for what you sold it for. You may sell it for more the second time around, and it may appraise, because an appraisal is simply no more than one person's opinion at one moment in time, period.
Yeah, speaking of appraisal opinions, I saw one of the agents on the team put on Facebook today. They're doing the Burr method on the house, and their home appraised for less than they thought it would, and they compared their three bed, 2-bath house to 2-bed, 1-bath houses around.
3-2 with a basement, 2-1 no basement was even worse than it's inexplicable. Honestly, they're just like realtors. There's bad realtors. There's bad appraisers. Just like any profession.
I talked to a really good appraiser the other day that was appraising my house, and he said, it's not as hard as it seems to become an appraiser, but the problem is you have to do a certain amount of hours shadowing another appraiser, and the problem with that right now it's like we've said, there's no inventory of homes, so it's hard to find appraisers to shadow
that are busy
enough. Just because there's not enough homes out there to appraise.
Yeah, there's not enough work. And appraisal management organizations throw up roadblocks and red tape and things like that. No, I agree. It's challenging. 2 years ago there would have been all you wanted, and now there's significantly less transactions.
Yeah, this appraiser was also an agent at one point and then became an appraiser.
Believe it or not, quite a few people do that. You'd think there might be a conflict of interest. I will say another thing about appraising is they're often scapegoated. They're the ones that get left holding a ton of responsibility, and they have actually very little to do with most transactions. Yeah. So
they can have very little or everything to do with their transaction.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not a problem until it is a problem. The appraiser is like a referee in a basketball game. You want them to be invisible, and when they're not invisible, there are problems. I've had personal properties of mine come in under appraise. I've written, upwards of 5-page, disputes on appraisal reports only to have them pretty much tossed in the garbage figuratively. I don't even know if they were read. I've never been successful at moving an appraisal value. I have been the same thread that you were referencing. I read as well, and what I can tell you that almost the best advice is if you're financing, change banks and get a new appraiser. Right? Just chalk that up to a loss and whatever costs exists, and go another route if you genuinely believe, because the chances of getting a bad appraisal from 2 consecutive appraisers is pretty low. So anyway, that's all we got for the first segment, folks. We'll be right back here on Talk Radio 1080 after a few words from our sponsors.
Welcome back to the Jay Pitts Show, Talk Radio 1080, Real News, Real Talk. I'm your co-host, Ryan Harris, sitting down with Jay Pitts. Jay, we were just talking about appraisals, appraisers. Is there a scenario in your mind that sticks out of a historically bad appraisal that you got?
I mean, my personal residence. Is that like what you're talking about? You've heard me tell this story?
No, I have not heard this story. I would love to hear it.
My personal residence sold. Not the one I live in, obviously now, the one that I sold before I bought the house that I'm in now. Put it on the market. This was 2019, so before most of the market run up, but in a good, brisk market, right? Market more simple with better rates.
The most normal market we've seen.
The most normal market we've seen in a while. Still a good market. Sold it in 3 days under multiple offers, slightly above list. Okay, it was an East Louisville. 4, 2.5 finished basement, 2-car garage. I did have an in-ground pool. Which you would think sometimes could go either way. You get people that are hard-nosed and a lot of people that are adamant about having one. In my case, it seemed to work in our advantage. Thankfully,
a little off topic. I feel like pools during COVID were huge.
They were.
They were definitely a good thing then.
So I have a friend that purchased a home, decided not to move into it, closed like the day the NCAA tournament was canceled.
Wow.
Decided not to move into it and sold it 3 months later after paying a commission at a small profit.
Wow.
It was the initial phase of COVID. It was like everything was shut down. So just the fact that he didn't lose his shirt is an indication that they absolutely. And if he'd waited another 3 months.
And he had a pool.
And this house had a pool.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I thought that was obvious, but apparently not. It had a pool. And that's why he didn't lose his shirt, essentially. But anyway, back to the appraisal story.
Yep.
It underappraised by $30,000. Okay. I had just had an appraisal done with another appraiser for the bridge financing because the house I bought was a fixer-upper. So I leveraged equity to do a large-scale renovation on the house I was moving into. And maybe that's something we can talk about at another time if you're not familiar with bridge financing. But basically, I had a substantial amount of equity in order to not sell my home because I had young children, and live in a construction site. I took a loan that paid off my mortgage, gave me my equity to put down and to use for renovation of the new property. So I had a large mortgage, which was a little nerve-inducing. But it underappraised by $30,000, and I didn't want to walk with $30,000 less. And I had just had the appraisal that justified the price, right? that the buyer agreed to pay. And the new appraiser, I had sent comps because I had sold homes in my own neighborhood that were the best comps. I sent those over. One was an off-market sale that he wasn't aware of. I sent it over. I found another off-market sale on the PVA because I knew my neighborhood. It was about a 75-home development in East Louisville, pretty small. And he didn't use any of the 3 comps I sent him.
Do
Not a single
appraisers
one.
use PVA very often? Or is it?
They should because especially over the last few years, with more transactions, there have been more off-market sales that should be captured. But instead, he went to inferior neighborhoods, right? Neighborhoods that had average sales prices substantially lower than ours for in-ground pools. Mine was the only home in the neighborhood with an in-ground pool. And so he prioritized that. And I said, look, man, like set the pool aside, give no value to the pool, and just comp it to this one over here that I sold that was the best comp, and this one over here that I sold off market that was the second best comp, and that one over there that was off market sale that was the third best comp. And forget the fact that it has a pool, because that's certainly not going to detract from my value. These 3 comps right here would have brought it in on time. So what did I do to put a bow on the story? I wasn't able to get the appraisal moved. I couldn't convince the buyer to get a second appraisal. The buyer still wanted a house, and I got them to meet me in the middle and pay $15,000 out of pocket. So I forewent $15,000, unfortunately, and the buyer paid $15,000. We shook hands on it. Everything was good.
You know, some people might be listening to this, and I even wonder it sometimes too. If you have multiple offers, I guess first, like, what's the point of an appraisal? Like, I think some people understand it, but can you talk about what the point of an appraisal is? Because a lot of people would believe if you're getting multiple offers on a house, that's the open market setting the value of that house where it is.
Well, so the appraiser actually represents, most people don't know this, they don't represent the buyer, they represent the bank.
Right.
The bank that's financing for the buyer. They do represent the buyer in the event that the buyer's paying cash and they elect to have an appraisal, which is less common. But the bank is who hires them. Now, the buyer pays for it, but the appraisal belongs to the bank. So essentially, the appraiser's chief function is to keep the bank from overextending too much credit against an undervalued asset, or an overvalued asset, I guess I should say. If a house sells for $500,000 and the appraiser deems it worth $480,000, and the bank wants to conduct their risk assessment based on $480,000 as the value, not as $500,000. Now, you may say, oh, well, they were putting down $100,000 anyway. Okay, fair enough. But the bank still does risk assessments based on the percentage that you borrow. So that may make you qualify for a slightly higher rate, slightly less desirable terms, and the bank needs to underwrite that financing based on the proper risk profile. Assuming there is a good appraisal report to me would be one that comes up with an accurate market value,
yeah.
Right? What a buyer will give, what a seller will accept without any unnormal duress or stress. So in my scenario, I would accept X, the buyer would pay X. There was no stress, right? Everything was normal for the market. Sold in a few days. There was one competing offer. There was a few other showings. Like, it wasn't 85 offers and they overshot it by $50,000. They paid what I would accept at that point. That's the definition of market economics. So anyway, I was salty about this for a long time. Chalk it up to part of the business, but it's an example. I felt like it was improper. It was inferior. They should have done a better job.
Did you get a chance to talk to the appraiser?
Of course I did. He didn't appreciate my opinion.
All right.
I mean, nobody wants to, look, it's nobody makes mistakes on purpose, Ryan. I mean, all right, so here's a quote. Have I used this on this show before?
Let's see.
You should never attribute to malice which can be easily attributed to ignorance.
That has not been said on this show yet.
So I don't believe he was malicious. I believe he was ignorant. That's unfortunate. He probably didn't think he was ignorant. He probably thought I was, because we all like our own Kool-Aid, right? So There you go.
All right, it's enough on appraisals. Let's talk about this article here. we've been talking about this, Jay, a lot. These people are mortgage locked. And finally, an article came across that I found in the last couple of days saying, let's read it here. So the title is 82% of sellers, buyers feeling lock-in effect in today's market. We've known for some time that seller buyers in the U.S. are feeling the lock-in effect of their lower mortgage rates, and now there's a survey to prove it. Woohoo, finally. Realtor.com published the results of a new survey conducted with Harris X that shows 82% of those looking to buy and sell a home feel locked into their low rates.
Yeah. I don't see specifics. I've seen some specifics quoted, but not in article form.
Also, what is Harris X? I've never heard of that. It sounds official.
I have no idea who Harris X
Maybe
is. Are you
my last name?
You are Harris X? Like,
yeah, I did a study with Realtor.com.
Your consulting firm. I would believe that 82% feel locked in. You know how I feel
Not locked in.
You know how I feel about that feeling.
I feel like I could sue someone.
I feel, yeah. More than half, 56% plan to wait for rates to come down, while 20% have a personal need to sell soon. Baby boomers are least affected. Another thing that we've been quoted as saying, as high rates, tend to have less effect because they have a substantial amount of equity in their homes, sometimes even no mortgages at all. So, yeah, I believe 82% feel the sentiment that they are locked in. Right. I don't want to sell my property because I think this is going to drive a whole new generation of folks toward real estate investing that have a primary residence that is around the market median or even below, that are locked in at 30-year fixed rates in the threes, that can have substantial positive cash flow into the future. And they're going to have to find ways, home equity line of credit, maybe if rates come down, maybe not, maybe just good old-fashioned savings, right, to get into the next property, because they will have a life change that makes them desirous of moving, right? But they're not going to want to give up that near free money, of 3.25% fixed on 30 years. I don't know.
I think that's true. I think I've seen that from some of my friends lately.
That's great. I mean, I think this is spot on, but I mean, it's not novel. It's
it also, though, if you look at it, hurts the inventory issue once again. It's just another thing.
Yeah. That's just it. Like we discussed on episodes past, all stimulus is demand stimulus. No supply side stimulus. The market forces are constraining the supply side, and we don't have any. There's no solution been posed. I think there could be something smart, small business financing, something, right? Like something could be done to get business owners to build more property.
We'll cut to a couple sponsors here, a couple minutes, and then I'll ask you what you think can be done about that. This is Talk Radio 1080, the Jay Pitts Show. I'm your co-host, Ryan Harris. See you in a bit.
And we're back, folks. Welcome back to the Jay Pitts Show. You're on Talk Radio 1080. Real news, real talk, real estate, as Ryan likes to say. Ryan, are we going to talk about people's pets? Gen Z and pets?
I guess so.
I see it on the show rundown. Pets over partners. I can't say that I'm surprised. Gen Z wants fenced yards over double sink vanities. Now, they're not talking to any millennials. That's for sure, because if I had, this is such a point of privilege, I will say, my wife and I would throw elbows if we were brushing our teeth in the same sink every day. I think there would be elbows. I would go to the powder room down the hall is what I would do.
Yeah, my wife and I just moved to a new house with way more room in the bathroom, and it's already been awesome.
It's not something that you ever need until you have it, and then you don't want to go back. It's a regression. It's a life regression. Once you have your own sink, because then they don't have to complain about your shaving clippings. They don't have to complain about you leaving the top off the toothpaste. You get your own toothpaste now.
I've seen this very clever, I don't even know what you call it, but for shaving clippings, you hook it on like your shirt and you suction cup it to the mirror, and it's supposed to catch all your shaving clippings.
That kind of sounds disgusting to me.
Sounds like way more work than I want to do too.
I prefer just not shaving. How about that? That's a good one. Trimming maybe, not shaving. All right. So,
You want me to read what the article says here?
I mean, I think we get the gist, man. I mean, Gen Z is a different breed, right? Less convention, right? I think having children has become a later and later in life kind of endeavor for generations, even the millennial generation, which I think technically you're a member. You're not quite Gen Z,
yeah,
right?
I think last show we talked about, no, I am. I'm the youngest. No, I'm not Gen Z. Sorry.
You're
I'm
youngest
the youngest millennial.
And I'm the oldest millennial.
Correct.
This is something we should have discussed before we titled the show. It could have been like, work that in. But no, I see this, these trends and walkability, parks close by, certain amenities that are, more Gen Z. Okay. It's almost like the things that we would see attributed to the millennial generation that never quite landed. Everybody thought the millennial generation did not want to be homeowners. We were going to rent, we are the pay as you go generation. And it just never really materialized. And I think the millennial generation actually ended up quite a bit like their parents, the baby boomers.
It seems like that's trying to get pushed down to Gen Z now.
Which, who knows? I mean, we always trend, we trend at a younger age to be slightly more progressive and at older ages to be slightly more conservative. I mean, if you think about just the words in general, conservative, conserve, when you have something, which you tend to have in older age, later in life, after more success and savings and things like that, when you have a family to protect, you would like to conserve what you have to be able to provide for that family. When you're younger and you don't have anything, it's easier to be progressive. And these are a lot of them. I don't mean politically, right? I just mean emotionally. Like, these are progressive ideas. Like, you someday, I would guess, right? And maybe in a few less percentage points than the millennial generation, which is probably a few less percentage points than the boomers. But I would guess that one day Gen Z will wake up and they'll want the same things the millennials did.
I think that's absolutely what's going to happen. Maybe not, but we'll see. I think it's very interesting to pay attention to trends of the younger demographic. Some of the best entrepreneurs that have ever lived or existed talk a lot about how, the reason they came up with their idea or reason they were able to do what they did is they surrounded themselves with younger people and went and even hung out with high schoolers just to figure out what they're doing, or they had kids that were high schoolers and they were around all their friends and they were an entrepreneur and they figured, hey, this might be a good idea. Gary Vee's somebody who talks about this a lot.
Yeah, he does. I absolutely agree with that. Something that comes to mind from this article too. It's just the proliferation of media to me. Okay, so this comes from Broke Agent Media, right? Which is a media company specifically commenting and providing commentary on residential real estate. So 40 years ago, there was no entity that existed like this. Okay. There was no consumption for content like this, right? The speed of media, the access of information has put us in a position where we have this never ending demand for some type of narrative. And we know, honestly, that a lot of people like to be fed things that they believe in. Okay, so my question would be, 40 years ago, if you asked Gen X, a young Gen Xer, okay, young people have pets before. I mean, people test their ability to be responsible with pets before they test it with children, in a lot of cases. So if you asked a young Gen X, do you like having pets?
Sure, I love it.
I'm sure you do. Oh, and you don't have kids yet. Well, on average, the generation before you had kids 5 years younger, which I'm sure was true going from boomer to Gen X. So, these trends are, unavoidable. But is the fact that we're focusing in on this question, it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy because we didn't ask the question. We probably would have got the same answer then.
Tell you what, I just got super laser focused right there. I thought you were about to put me through a role play, a skit there.
No, I'm not going to do it. Not going to do it
like
to
how
you.
we used to practice in the brokerage.
I've been known to. I've been known to do a little real estate, script role play.
You started that. I was like, all right, here we go. I got to focus right now.
You're like, oh no, he's going to put me on the spot.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think this is yeah, I get it, but check back with me in 15 years and we'll see.
Yep. All right.
Gen Z will have 2.1 children, and live in the suburbs.
Yep. All right. Let's move on. Here we have. This is a little local news. Southwest Louisville home values are being reassessed. Here's what to know. It's that time of year again. Homeowners in West and Southwest Louisville will soon receive postcards in the mail telling them their home's new assessed value. Dun, 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 dun.
Well, again, this is not news. The assessors examine home values on an annual basis. Reassessments after periods. Okay, so think about it like this. What are assessors' jobs? They're a part of the Property Valuation Administration, right? So basically, when there is a brisk real estate market, there is plenty of work to do. Here's what traditionally happens. You go through this boom period, right? And as soon as there's a minor break in activity, they decide to reassess. Okay, why? Why is that? Because when the economy grows, inflation happens, even at a healthy level, right? And costs go up. So you have to collect more tax revenue to provide the same services. So the assessor's job is to adequately and accurately assess the value of a property so that the citizens can pay a fair tax rate, a tax rate based on a fair value, right? So that the government has the income they need to provide the citizens the services that they need. Okay, so this is just typical. It's just typical. I would say there's a lot of density of single-family dwellings in West Louisville and Southwest Louisville. There also tend to be zip codes that carry lower median prices as compared to other quadrants in the city. And so they probably had farther to rise and therefore, on a percentage basis, more revenue to be generated. Okay, so again, not news. This is typical. Why is my house being reassessed? Because things cost more.
Yeah.
And you need to pay more taxes so that we can still provide you with roads and sidewalks and public parks.
Yeah, it's not news, but I really doubt the majority of homeowners realize. I mean, this article says a state law requires properties to be reassessed at least once every 4 years.
Absolutely. And that's smart because what can happen is because, governments, like any other organization, can be operated efficiently or inefficiently, right? So what if, your grandmother on a fixed income, which there's homestead exemption, we can talk about that too, but your grandmother gets used to paying a certain property tax for 10 years, right? Because there hasn't been a reassessment. And she builds her entire lifestyle surrounding that because that's a substantial portion of her fixed income, right? And then all of a sudden she gets a reassessment after 10 years and her property taxes go up $1,000 a year. That's $1,000 unaccounted for. And you can't expect people, when you don't assess very often, to be able to prepare for that on their own. So it must be assessed every 4 years. It can be assessed annually. So again, to me, not news. But you're right. Most homeowners don't understand this process.
Yeah, I feel like, most people probably just think it's the government wanting to come and get more money, but
it absolutely is. But
you
it's
explained
necessary.
it. Why though?
It's absolutely necessary. The government needs the money to be able to provide you, to be able to subsidize utilities, to be able to provide roads, and to be able to provide sidewalks and fire hydrants and, police and all the things that you need to be able to live in a safe and functioning society.
Yeah, it's not a fun thing to talk about, but it's just, it's what it is. It's
nobody ever wants to pay more than their fair share, and that's really where the rub is. What is fair?
It's the only time you want your property value to be low.
And that's why we say that assessed value is simply not market value. All right, folks, that's all we got for you here in segment 3 on Talk Radio 1080. This is the Jay Pitt Show. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Jay Pitt Show. I'm your co-host Ryan Harris on Talk Radio 1080. Jay, we got a little bit more time here.
I do.
You want to talk about just some common real estate scams? We can talk about from the consumer's point of view or agent point of view.
No, this is a good one. This is a good topic. And you know, this is almost like a PSA because the consumers out there, you may or may not even be in the market and be subject to victimization of very prevalent residential real estate scams. So I'll just cite a few, okay, and we can talk them out individually. So one is your property is listed online for rent, okay? The scammer is usually not local. They essentially spoof a for lease or a for rent listing on Craigslist. Craigslist was the one we've seen it a lot on Facebook Marketplace.
It's usually a great deal.
It's usually a great deal. So you've got a 3-bed, 2.5 bath, 2-car garage, finished basement, in East Louisville with 3,200 square feet, and the rent is $1,200 a month. Right, where it should be more like $3,000 a month, right? And so the listing is phenomenal. The spoof listing typically includes some type of heartstring tug type sob story about how somebody is taking advantage of me and I've had to move out of state. It's often vacant properties that are most victimized in these situations. Think, your grandmother just went to assisted living and her home is sitting there, but you haven't really cleaned out the stuff yet and got it ready to go to the market or to be rented. So it's sitting there vacant so people go and walk around the house and they don't disturb anyone. So there's no red flags, but it often asks for, money to be mailed or Venmo'd or some method of sending cash as a deposit, quote unquote, and the keys and the documents will follow. Sometimes I've even seen forged, or spoofed documents. Just very simple to download a simple lease online and kind of perpetrate this fraud. So here's the thing. It happens a lot on houses that are for sale, and they'll include kind of a criticism of the existing agent. Hey, I fired him. He won't come get his sign. Don't listen to him. He's a liar. He did this to me. He did that to me, etc. So that is one that is pretty typical. This first happened to me in 2010, 13 years ago. That same example I told you, it was my client's grandmother who was in assisted living. The house was sitting vacant. I had it for sale, and people just started calling me out of the blue saying, hey, this seems too good to be true. They told me that you're a scammer and I need to not listen to you. So do you know anything about this? And I was like, no. I mean, you can read my reviews online. I'm perfectly credible. This is who owns this house. This is the scenario. The house is for sale. It is not for rent. Do not send them money. So that's one. And that's pretty common.
Yeah.
So definitely be careful with respect to that. Another that I've seen revolves around typically free to you email communication, right? And you'll see this is a big hot button topic for title companies or title attorneys' offices that handle the funds at a closing. You may or may not know it, but your data is sold on the dark web. Your passwords are not safe in some cases. You'll get these messages from time to time that you need to change your password. It's been included in a data leak, what have you. So a Gmail, right? And I think by and large, most I've seen Google's not the worst. It's more like Yahoo or Hotmail or some of those other accounts. But you could get your email hacked, right, and not know it. And people could be following your communication. And let's say you're in the middle of a real estate transaction. Mm-hmm. And people could use hacking your email to essentially clone you and communicate with your loan officer, your title company. They could pretend to be you if you're a seller and provide wiring instructions for your funds to be wired once closing happens. You're never the wiser, right? because you just presumed that your professionals that are repping you have taken care of things, when in fact maybe they did, okay, but just through email communication, someone has pretended to be you and provided wiring instructions, and you go sell your house, sign the deed. You think you're getting a check, but the money's already been wired to, a bank in the Cayman Islands. And it's your $400,000 that you expected to walk away with from the sale, and it's just gone, and good luck getting it back. So the moral of that story is that every real estate agent listening to this, every title company, every title attorney, and every investor or even homeowner buyer or seller, never, ever, 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 ever transmit non-public information via email. Never. I don't care how secure you think your connection is. I don't care if you've never signed on to the Wi-Fi at Starbucks, right? Do not send wiring instructions, social security numbers, credit card numbers, even DOB. I wouldn't even give your DOB over email. Pick up the phone and talk to the title attorney's office. Give them the information over the telephone. When COVID hit, we weren't doing in-person closings. So I orchestrated with our typical title companies that we work with to wire funds to our agents for commission payments, right? You know how difficult that was? Like, I had to talk to every title attorney in town that we do business with and make sure they had the proper wiring instructions for us.
And then you have the random title companies you close at. And
oh, man. And they were like, yeah, we'll mail you a check, and I've got an agent that needs a paycheck because half their deal's canceled and they need the one check that they're going to get this. Anyway, my point is just don't ever, especially wiring instructions. You know that disclaimer at the bottom of the email signature that you see? Okay, title companies, that whole thing is about wire fraud. It's a big, big issue.
So I would say those two scams that you talked about there on the more sophisticated end, the ones that crack me up are the ones that agents get.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I'm about to say, but so real estate agents in a brokerage or on a team, they get probably 5 texts a week, maybe. So, for example, hi, this is Jay Pitts. I'm in a meeting right now, and I need you to go get me 10 gift cards immediately from Target and send them to me.
Yeah, take pictures of the serial numbers and text them to me.
Yeah, like, did you get a new number, Jay?
Yeah, no, it's like, it's not even this area code. They can't even be bothered to get a 502 number.
And you know what I always think about these things? They wouldn't be doing it if it didn't work.
I agree.
So it obviously, sadly, works enough for them to keep doing it.
Well, the best part for me is the trolling that happens with our agents in the office, and they have some fun with these hackers. These
don't give them. They're not hackers. That's
too sophisticated.
Yeah,
they're scammers. Well, just before,
and they're not very good at it.
Just before we went on air today, I got a lead, quote unquote, from Google. Some of the Google ads we run, pay-per-click ads we run, that purported to be a buyer moving in from out of the country and wanted me to communicate with them via WhatsApp. That is usually a red flag, I will tell you. The broken written English, not saying that everybody has to speak perfect English. I'm not saying that, but where there's smoke, there's fire, right? It's like, did you see the meme about the prince who died in his apartment in New York with like $80 million in cash because nobody would respond to his email?
No, I did not.
It's a pretty good meme, but it was like kind of a similar circumstance and situation. Yeah, if you catch my drift there.
It's funny trying to picture a meme when you don't see the meme.
I know. I'm like giving you the verbal meme.
Speaking of just scams, though, this isn't a real estate scam. It's one I saw this week that, I'll be honest, I haven't really ever seen before, but there are a lot of people in Louisville asking for on social media, Facebook or Instagram or Twitter even, asking for Adam Sandler tickets or Morgan Wallen tickets. And the comment section was just filled with bots that actually look like, legit profiles saying, hey, I have 2 tickets, send me a message. And they're all just scams. I haven't seen that one before until this week.
No, it's pretty timely. Of course, Sandler was last night, so there won't be any more. Or does he have another show tonight? Wallen's tonight.
Wallen's tonight.
Yeah. So
And
Anyway.
those tickets are pricey.
Oh, I saw. We're leaving. We're leaving to go out of town again. This time without the kids. So otherwise, I was totally in on Morgan Wallen. I needed to take my wife to that show, but we'll go to Florida instead. How about that?
Do you want to try to answer this last question?
Yeah, I think so.
I think it could be a quick one. Do you think you'll ever retire? We got about a minute and a half, so.
So the answer is, I could almost. So I want to work because I want to, not because I have to. Right now, I still have to work. Now they say if you find something you love doing, you'll never work a day in your life, and I think there's something to be said for that. I genuinely and truly enjoy what I do. I don't do anything I don't want to do. And earlier in my career, I certainly did. So like I've made progress in that direction. You know, I'm a busybody, man. I might play some more golf one day. You know, when my kids are grown and I don't have sports to coach and I don't have that competitive outlet, I could see myself trying to get decent. You know, I'm not at this point. I'm an athlete, but I'm not a golfer. And I could see myself trying to get decent one day and spending some more time doing it. I think if I did spend a significant amount of time, I would get okay. Not probably as good as you, but okay enough. But I'll never stop completely.
You know, I was listening to a podcast yesterday. Ruben, the owner of Fanatics, he said he believes he'll never retire, and he thinks once you retire, it's basically waiting for your death. And he said he's always going to work 18 hours a day, 7 days a week for the rest of his life.
You need purpose. Everyone needs purpose and something to strive for, right? And if you know, my goal in life right now is to provide for my family, and one day it may be to help my children achieve what they want, you know? And I could see my purpose changing, and I could see me taking it a little easier, spending some more time, doing some more travel with my wife. But I'm a busybody.
I'll tell you what, before we close it out here, if you try to get good enough at golf throughout the day for long enough, through weeks and months, it's going to feel like a job. So there's your purpose. But that's all we have for you. It's the Jay Pitt Show. I'm your co-host, Ryan Harris. Talk Radio 1080, real news, real talk. We'll see you next week.